Podcast Mastermind. I'm super excited to have somebody who is like a bright shining star, especially lately in my world. I'm like, there's Sophie, there's Sophie. Oh my gosh, what is she up to? Super curious about you, and you're doing some phenomenal things. So I want to welcome Sophie Jones to the show today.
Hi, everyone.
How are you, darling?
Hey there.
Hey, girl.
Hey, girl.
Hey, so yeah, thank you so much for your time. I know that you have quite a bit of big projects going on right now, and we'll get into the depths of all the things that are going on in Sophie's world. But just to let our audience and listeners know of our history of how we met. So we both are in the real estate world, and it was in 2010-ish where we met. You were at a local Utah company, and I was often in their meetings because they were very much about, growth and development, and that's kind of where I met you. And I remember when I first saw you, I was like, oh my gosh, so that girl is so like gorgeous, and she seems like she's very successful. And so I was always observing you and just watching you. And then we kind of stayed in contact, just through social media. We've even had a couple of just like very deep calls. I remember a couple years ago, we were just like, you called me and we were just having some really great conversations.
Totally. I got that when you just, that was amazing. Yeah, totally.
And I'm like, oh, this girl is deep. And I love watching your journey and your growth. And what I have to say is that I've absolutely loved seeing the vulnerability that you have been so open to sharing with some of these, big, big things in your life that some have been traumatic and some have made you who you are. I'm sure all of them have made you who you are, but it's almost like this, you're making a big impact in the community. And I know you're very into breath work as well. You're doing the breath work sessions. And so I'm going to stop talking now and give the mic to you, because I want to hear more about Sophie's life.
Okay, awesome. We had like 2 days, we could cover all of it, but we'll get it done. I'm Sophie Jones, and Nuria's right. We met in 2010. I'm from Sandy, Utah. And when we started talking, I'll tell you just a little bit about my upbringing, because I think it made an impact down the line. So I wasn't from the predominant faith in Salt Lake, and I currently live in Montana. And Montana is the 8th state I've lived in. So, and I moved away for the first time when I was 15. And what I learned when I moved away was that there was like a medium, like in other places. Like there were like the wild kids, there were like kids that were kind of in the middle, and then maybe there were kids that were more conservative. And just being from Salt Lake, that wasn't my experience. It was like you were either probably pretty religious and from the predominant faith, or you were like really wild. So I grew up pretty wild, and I moved in with my dad when I was 8 years old to Sandy. My mom was an alcoholic. She's been in recovery for a really long time, but there was abuse even when I was very young. My parents weren't around a ton. My grandparents were raising me when I was younger, like up until I was 5. And when you start to learn about formative years and how we attach to people, I can see how these things made a huge impact on how I would go and recreate trauma. So I say that for anyone that maybe we'll get there, but like cycles and the same stuff. Mm-hmm. So my dad's an attorney. He's a criminal and family attorney in Salt Lake. He's been there a long time. And, I was raised in a household there was a lot of values. But, it was interesting. It's like there'd be poker night with a bunch of like my uncles, if you will, and like little Sophie running around, or, I'd go to dinner with my dad and his guy friends, to the Market Street like 4 nights a week. So I was just raised in this very masculine and different environment. And I was raised around a lot of adults.
Yes.
Yeah. So, see what else do I want to share about that. I didn't know how to read when I moved in with my dad, which was really difficult. Being 8, I didn't really start reading fluently. I was dyslexic till I was 10.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a huge thing for me. Like a story of mine is I'm not smart. And I've tried to prove that in other areas with making money. And then also when I moved in with my father, you know, a lot because we lived in Sandy and it was very traditional in the predominant faith, a lot of kids weren't allowed to hang out with me. Like, because it was just a single man raising his daughter. And we weren't religious. And so, or we would go to church, but not Mormon church. So I was raised around a bunch of like bad kids in the neighborhood. So at a very young age, I loved a bad boy. Like, I think for as long as I can remember, I had like an affinity for a bad boy. And I'm telling you, like, came right out that way. And that would play out.
Us do though, let's be honest, ladies. You know, anyone who's listening, it's like, ooh, the bad boy. Ooh, yeah. Like,
totally.
I
Like,
don't
it
know
took me like well into my 30s, like probably until I met Warren, my fiance, the gentleman I'm with now, to like really get over that and do some really, really deep healing. So in my adolescence, I partied quite a bit. I moved to Virginia my sophomore year of high school. That was a huge blessing in disguise for me. I moved to rural Virginia where I was the minority, being from Sandy, Utah. And it was like a huge wake up call. It was like, you know, I thought I was tough and mean and knew everything. And, you know, you get over there and you're like, okay, maybe not.
Oh boy.
Yeah. But I got to be on varsity cheerleading out in Virginia. So I got to do some things. I got to be on dance team. I ended up dating the biggest drug dealer in the school. I didn't get to go to prom because he got arrested. So, but I think there's always been this sense of working hard. Like even when I was young and little, like I always wanted to be keeping busy. I always wanted to work hard. If there was snow, I was out there with my dad shoveling the driveway. So this was also a big theme. So I came back to Salt Lake my junior year. I went to a really small private school and I graduated that year and became a lifty up at Snowbird. And I was drinking a lot. I didn't have a ton of direction. None of my friends had a lot of direction. They were in the snowboarding industry. And I had, looking back now, because I'm in recovery and we'll talk about it, but I drank alcoholically from the very beginning. Like I don't think I can remember very many times that I was just drinking. Maybe I thought I was drinking to enjoy, but I was like very much, and that was what my friends were doing. So
you were drinking to like cope. You were drinking to,
I think I even remember when I graduated high school, I got an apartment with a girlfriend and I was 17. Her parents got us the apartment. Like we'd go out and party and I'd wake up on the bathroom floor with her next to me and she'd be like, I thought you were going to die last night. Like, I just think so much trauma was happening, feeling not smart, feeling like I couldn't fit in. I didn't ever feel as pretty as my girlfriends. I mean, if you see people from Sandy, I mean, a lot of people are from Utah there. If you're not from Utah, like there's just like a very beautiful demographic going on there. And abuse when I was younger, I just didn't know how to be comfortable being. So it was like, okay, we're going to drink all of it. And then the snowboarding industry was a big deal. So I dated a guy that owned part of a snowboarding company. He was also a rep. And in between there, this is an important part, I dated this very scary, predominant drug dealer that would be in and out of prison and actually ended up being like a guardian angel for me. We'll talk about him later. So
wow.
I moved to Colorado with this guy. Everyone's partying, everyone's in the snowboarding industry. People, I mean, at this point in time, the normal people are like going on missions, going to BYU, but like I didn't even really, and maybe what part of Salt Lake are you from?
I grew up in Sandy as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't have, and maybe this is just, so this would be a good thing for me to ask you. I didn't have a ton of friends like applying to go to school. Like, did you experience that?
Yeah, I would say about 50% of them, but it definitely wasn't like a huge, I agree with you. It wasn't like a huge focus. It was like only a small amount of like we're looking at, universities and good colleges. Yeah, I would say that in other markets and in other states, it's probably way higher
Way
of
more.
like
I mean,
a
just looking at like
focus.
sophomore year, it's like it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, so just one and so I moved to Colorado and I, hard worker, served tables with this gentleman and we were together for a couple of years and then we went up to Portland, Oregon where his snowboarding company was located and I got a great job serving tables. I'm just young, I'm partying, you can't tell me anything, life can't come fast enough. And when we broke up, I was like, oh, I'll go find another bad boy. Because what I learned is through my trauma experience, like what would be perceived to unsafe to other people is very safe to me. So like I saw The Godfather when I was 10 and was like, that is my life's purpose. I'm marrying into the mob. Like I really like that type. I mean, it's crazy to say now.
Your little girl's big dream is where it was to be a part
Oh
of
my God. I mean, I wait till the story we get there. But it's like looking back, it was like possessive, controlling, powerful, in the underbelly of society. That was all very drawing to me. Like I wanted to be this type of kind of lady of the night and boss and feel protected by that. Like, and I think also that was because I never felt good around what I would perceive as normal people. Like that made me feel very uncomfortable. So I met
your
a gentleman.
safety was around that environment.
Yeah. So what would be safe to others made me feel very unsafe.
Mm.
And I think people can even relate. I see people do this with food. I see people do this with a different type of relationship. I see people do this where it's like what would be perceived as unhealthy is really people's like motive of being healthy, right? This is why habits are so incredibly hard to break that aren't good for us because they feel good.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I met a gentleman named Jermaine. That's his legal name. And he had been a pimp for a long time. And, I'd already been around the streets mentality. So there's some type of like badge of honor with that, right? Like what people would perceive as ghetto. Like if you get to, in my mind, like the mob, it's like there's this different level of like, oh, you can make it not in societal norms. I met him. I didn't think about prostitution at the time, but I got a DUI. I lost my job. I was doing cocaine pretty regularly. And I just had and I was too prideful to tell my family, like, I need help. Mm-hmm. And so this gentleman that had moved back from Las Vegas, just started grooming me, just started like bringing women around that had nice things, showing me that he cared, like taking care of certain things where I was like, okay, this is someone I can trust. Like it's going to be okay. And it's emotional to think about because I don't often but
I honor your vulnerability.
yeah.
It's not an easy conversation. So.
I really wanted to be loved and taken care of, like at the most fundamental core. That's what I was looking for. So I moved in with him. This all happened maybe in the span of about a month. And he made me get rid of my dog. I'll never forget that. And then I agreed. I said, you know what? I think I can do this. I mean, like he'd have me like watch videos where it was like glamorizing prostitution. I mean, just really started to like normalize prostitution in my eyes. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I did like maybe a week in Portland, and then he took me away. And so anyone that's ever had any human trafficking in their life or in their family, they understand like that's exactly what they have to do. Like take you out of your comfort zone where you are 100% dependent on this person. So we flew to New York, and then we were in New Jersey, we were in DC, we were in Florida. And meanwhile, being from Salt Lake, you know, prostitution was a lot done online unless you're in a major city. And so someone had told somebody that that's what I was doing. And being from Salt Lake, like everybody all of a sudden knew, right? Like that's what I was doing. I didn't know that until I came home. But so I'm with Jermaine. I'm like, this is the oldest profession in the world. Everything is fine. And I'll never forget the first time he was violent. He broke a cell phone on my face. Like I was talking, and that says how hard he hit me, is like my cheekbone broke the cell phone. And like I had dealt with abuse when I was really little, but never really, it's funny because it's like even in like those scarier type situations with men, like I never, or let's say, yeah, just I never, that was, the abuse physically was never a part of it. And I just remember being terrified and like, oh my God, like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Meanwhile, my family.
Terrifying. Absolutely.
Terrifying. But you're also like, it's, you know, you can look at even, you're so
like codependent on this person, right?
yeah. And you've drank the poison. So it's like, you're codependent, but you're like, this is normal. Like I was just correcting my behavior, wow. Which is super crazy because I was always like, you couldn't tell me anything. Like, you know what I mean? I wasn't really subservient, but in some ways, and I think that's why I would go find controlling men to like see like who was going to be in the power struggle. And this guy was like, I win, you know? So we went down to Vegas. In the meantime, my family contacted the FBI, contacted every human trafficking association. And they, you know, were just like praying all the time. I'm in Vegas, and, you know, part of being in prostitution, if there's a pimp involved, is like the more the merrier when it comes to workers. And so that was like, I was really jealous. That was very hard for me. And so this gentleman that I mentioned earlier, George, that would go in and out of prison, but in a lot of ways, you know, I think in a lot of ways we're each other's guardians and soulmates. He was a very good person. I loved the Hispanic culture. I loved anything that was I knew his family really well. And so, so he comes out of prison. I come home a few times, and the specialists are telling my family, like, you have to just act like everything's fine. Like if you try to grab onto her, she is going to want to come home. And if she feels like there's any judgment or that you're going to lock her there, anything, she won't come to you. Like you have to normalize this, which was just so terrifying for my family. And so I came home a few times, and abuse is still happening. And so the day before I left, Jermaine almost beat me to death in the shower. Like my face was I just had never experienced trauma like that. And like, even in prostitution and in that exchange with men, I would just dissociate to like a whole different degree. You know, it just was like, but I also dissociate during the act, let's say the sexual act, but I really enjoyed, let's say, the mingling. I'm a very charismatic person. The getting to know people. This is why real estate worked really well for me. So there's that part of it, but I'm in the shower, and he's a huge guy. He's like 6'5", just like used to be an MMA fighter. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I'm going to die. Like I'm for sure going to end up in the desert 100%. Wow. So there's a total God moment. Yeah. And looking back, there's so many women that deal with abuse. Mm-hmm. Like, and I would go and search it out, not to that level, but like, again, you normalize what feels comfortable, what feels familiar. And so to be in an environment like that, it's like, we have to start normalizing abuse more so that people can get help around it. Like, it's such a shameful thing for women to be like, oh, my husband hit me, and all your girlfriends are like, why do you stay? Blah, blah, blah. Like, there's so much more going on when stuff like that's happening. So,
Absolutely.
um,
I actually, I think it was maybe 3, 4 years ago for my Dreamers Foundation, the event we raised money for the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition. Um, and so, it's close to me. But I definitely want to, just take this moment in this episode to just really, anyone who might be in this situation that might be feeling, or like some of the same emotions that you've gone through, or some of the similar situation where it's like, oh, it's fine, this is okay, like
yeah,
any of that, like please know that this is just not okay ever.
yeah,
And that there are support groups and there are people that you can reach out.
so many resources.
Yes, there are so many. And if you're in Utah, please, Utah Domestic Violence Coalition is a great place. One of many that you can go to. And
There's a ton of support groups on Facebook now. Like, there are places because if it feels too scary to go to somewhere like domestic, violence coalition, and you think that they're going to come in your house, or if you have children, they're going to take them away. I would encourage people to start looking for groups online where you can get community around the same thing, and then they can start directing you, because it takes baby steps to, you know what I mean, to go, oh my God, this isn't normal. This isn't right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So thank you for um, sharing this part of you, because it's so important to talk about, and especially right now with COVID and everything going on, and people really, being home more, and it can get very scary, and it's very traumatic, and it's not somewhere safe at all ever. I don't care what situation you're in and all the excuses you make out for the abuser, like it's never okay, ever okay.
Yeah. And there's no judgment around it happening to you. Like, this is why I talk about it today, because I look very normal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
People don't look at me and go, oh, she used to be a prostitute, she had some pimp, she's dated drug dealers, cartel members, she's been abused. That is why why I started sharing it, because it's like, I want to relate. I can relate to the girl in the streets just as much as I can relate to a housewife that's like, oh, he just gets angry. It's like, okay, well, we need to talk about what that means, and why, because it's never okay. And when I heard that, it's like, yeah, it's never okay, but no one's offering me a solution. So it's like, if you can find community that can support you, and you go, because when you're with an abuser, their job is to isolate you, and they're really good at it. So it's like, you don't have friends anymore. You don't talk to your family like that anymore. So the internet's a beautiful place to start building that community, start finding your voice, start finding a way out. There's a ton of resources.
Thank you for sharing that, Sophie.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm at the grocery store. It's the day after. My face is just like pummeled. And I don't really talk to any of my friends in Utah anymore. No one really knows what's going on except my family. Well, nobody of my friends will I let even near me. And my family knows. And lo and behold, George called my phone. He's got out of prison. He's paid one of my old friends for my phone number, which was his MO. And he's found out what's going on. And he was just like, it was the biggest godsend ever, because it was someone that could relate to the situation. It wasn't like my dad or like a police officer. It was like somebody else that knew the rules of the jungle. And we talked, and I just was sobbing in the grocery store and told him what happened. And he just said, hey, there's a couple things. He's like, I'll be there in 6 hours, and you know how that's going to go down. Or you will get on the plane ticket I just bought you. I didn't even know he had a bank account. I was like, you're allowed to have that? But he had bought me a plane ticket home for early the next morning. And then he said some very important things. And I think this is important for anyone. We'll talk about this going on in success too, but like, always look for the God winks. Like, pay attention. I have lived more of my life based off my intuition, because I'm like, I would navigate life that way. And so he said a couple things to me. He said, you know, you've got to call your family and let them know you're coming home. I can't be the only one. And then he also said to me, he's going to say that you can leave and he'll probably end up killing you. And I was like, why would he say that? How would he even know to say that? He wouldn't even, like, I can't even let him know I'm leaving. And he was like, it's going to come up and you for sure are not going to ever tell him you're leaving. And he's like, call me when, and he said, go act like you're going to go to work tonight, even with your face as it is, and call me when you leave your house. Mm. And I went to this big house that we were leasing. And I said, you know, I'd made a lot of money in like the 6 months this was going on. And I just said, no, I just don't know what happened to the money. And he got very postured and he was like, if you're not happy and you want to leave, just leave.
Oh boy.
And I just was like, from God's, you know, mouth to my ears, if you will, just went, oh. And I was like, you know, I want to go to work tonight. And he was like, okay. And I left, called George, and I called my family. And I flew home with just the clothes on my back, some pretty hard labels. I was now in my community in Salt Lake, looked at as a prostitute and an escort and other things. And that was really hard. You know, and I think that was one of the first, that probably up till this day, that was probably one of the most, if not the most pivotal moments in my life. Because I really believed, I felt like the universe and I made a pact that it was like, you don't let this, because this happened, you use this for an experience. Like, you don't let this define you. You're going to help people when you're ready. It's okay. So, for real. Okay, so I get home and I go and live with my mom for the first time since I was a sophomore in high school. And I see George, you know, I think I'm going to still escort in Salt Lake. I'm like, I need a ton of money. I just don't have a scary guy around. And I started drinking a ton and using drugs. And by this time, heroin, opiates, Oxycontin has just taken grip of most of the people I know in a lot of ways. And so I got really messed up for like a few days. I went home and slept at my mom's for a few days. Her and my stepfather were in recovery for a long time. And my mom just like, I woke up and she was like, you don't have to live this way. It can be different. So I joined a 12-step recovery program and said, I'm going to do it for a year. I don't have any problems. All the drinking that led up to me making those decisions has nothing to do with like who I am. I just like, everything's fine. I don't really have a problem around alcohol or drugs, which is like insane. So I'm like, looking back now, I'm like, so I got sober and said I was going to do it for a year. And I met my first mentor in business. His name's Travis Wood. His dad is Tim Wood, and Tim Wood's in like the millionaire real estate agent who was one of Mike Ferry's first coaches. He had a huge successful real estate company out in Big Bear, and Travis knew my story. And Travis was really super successful entrepreneur, former professional snowboarder, was really successful in the snowboarding world, and then got more successful in property ownership, stock market, and he did a lot of wholesale deals, like big, huge, giant deals. So in the terms of wholesale, I'd say like selling Oakley to TJ Maxx, right? Like kind of the clearance guy, right? So, so I'm going to continue escorting, and I reached out to Travis, and I just was like, hey, I know you know about investing. I'm going to keep doing this. And could you teach me about investing money? And I think he was out drinking. He's like very much like, he's settled down now, but like very much a playboy and like out having fun. He lives in California, and he was like, "I'll call me tomorrow. Here's my number." And I was like, okay. And I think part of it was like, I thought he was cute. But I also was just like, I could see he had like, I wasn't going to come back and go to college. And I could see he was earning the type of money that I was earning, if not way more. And like, I wanted to close that gap. And I don't think he went to college either. I'd have to ask him. So I called him the next day, and he said, if you give me 6 months, you can make whatever decision you want after 6 months. But give me 6 months. And looking back now, like this was another God wink. He just said, I'm going to give you books to read. You're going to touch base with me. We'll make a decision after 6 months. And I said, okay.
Wow.
The first book I read he told me to read was Think and Grow Rich.
It's my favorite still to this day. And I read a lot.
Yeah, I love that book. I've maybe read it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, love that book. I'm sure you've read Outsmarting or Outwitting the Devil that he wrote as well. Have you read that?
Mm-mm. So
Girl,
I'm gonna write that down.
I'll send you a screenshot when we're done.
Okay, awesome.
And then he had me read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm.
He had me read Cash Flow Quadrants. I was serving tables at Fiddler's Elbow. I didn't have a driver's license because of my DUI. I just walked. My mom lived in Sugar House. And I started to go, okay. Like I just was I wasn't around any of my friends because I was sober. So it was like this very like great incubated period where I was like, okay. I started dating a very successful commercial, probably if not the most successful commercial real estate agent for industrial real estate, Richard Ellis. So I was around, I mean, I always liked big fish. So, but I was around a different demographic. And so I think it was like 3 months in and he was like, okay, so you can get an insurance license or your real estate license. Like prostitution was on the table. And I was
like, no, not doing
yeah.
that.
And I loved homes and I loved, I would drive around and look at homes with my dad and my mom on Sundays. And so I got my real estate license and I came home in October of 2008 and I got my license. I actually called the commission a while ago. It was in like July of 2009. So and we start with real estate. Any questions, comments?
Oh my gosh. So cool. I love that your friend challenged you on giving him 6 months.
You know, you need to find those people.
Like how amazing, like if he wasn't there during that gap. And it was all about timing as well, because you were sober. You had gone through that process. And I just love how there's those huge defining moments in life. And I can assume that that was huge for you.
Huge. I mean, that completely changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, that whole year was like a pretty magical year from when I came home to when, I got my license and I just became hungry for success. So
I think you were always hungry for success.
Totally. I mean, I always wanted to be at the top. I didn't want to do it. And this is where you and I are very similar. There's something great at being at this high powered environment and it changes over time. But like on the chase to that, you look to the next person and it just like builds your character so much. Right. And it's like when you see, I was never interested in like taking the slow route or like taking my time or like, it was just like, what do I need to do? Who do I need to learn from? What coach do I need to hire? Because success can be addicting. It can feel so good, right? So I joined Coldwell Banker and Heather Pappas, she's a real estate agent at Everest at the time. This is also another God. So, yeah, Heather.
Heather.
She worked for a gentleman. Do you know who Ken Tramp is?
The name's familiar. I don't think I ever met him.
Okay, so Ken is very similar to George, but just a generation before. Okay. So Ken Tramp.
Or maybe did he coach him? Like maybe that's
they never coached together.
Oh, okay.
No, but if anyone's been in real estate, like
knows the name,
long time, they know who Ken Tramp is. And so Ken's daughter is my best friend, Sarah. So when I come home, I'm doing all these things. Sarah and I are hanging out a lot. And they connect some dots for me. And Ken's like, go work under Heather. So I worked under Heather. She put me on to Mike Berry. And so for anyone in real estate, I got a role play partner. I role played 5 to 6 days a week, every day for well over 5 years.
That's awesome.
Just like
dedicated to your craft, girl.
So then Heather was like, I'm not going to give you any leads, but I will teach you how to go and you need to prospect. I think the first year in business, I cried every day. Like, just because I wanted it so bad, like you see people that have been doing it for so long and they're just, and like, I'm going on these shitty appointments and, like, and people aren't answering.
Not easy, people. Everyone thinks it's so easy.
Yeah, don't want this like glamorous thing. And that's why I coach business owners and salespeople today, because it's like, we have to debunk the like sexy part of some of this stuff, but I stayed with it. So I prospected every day. I was in their front office in a conference room every morning making calls and serving tables at night. My boyfriend lived in Park City. I mean, I was working insane, not sleeping that much, getting up, being super dedicated, getting up at 5, listening to, either scripts or personal development. And then I went over to Everest, met George. We met at a Mike Ferry event, and George is a very charismatic person. For anyone, George, he's a great leader, super charismatic. They were not Century 21 yet. It was a small group. And it was just what I needed. My dad was always like, you would have done really well in the military, because like I do well with structure. And like that office, it was like you were there at 7 or 7:30, you were doing scripts and role play, you were writing out your goals and affirmations, the whole thing. And yeah, that's where I met.
That was a great group too.
It was a great group.
It really was. Like, I still always look back to those days and I'm like, that was a good crew.
I mean, everybody was like rowing in the same direction. It was like, we're head, or as you'd hear, we're climbing the mountain, and it would be like, you'd look to left or right and you'd see your like comrades like making the climb. It was great. Yeah. And real estate was amazing. My career's going super well. I go to Thailand and I meet my ex-husband.
Oh, it was there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went with Sarah to Thailand, and, I still have that adventurous spirit. He was in the military. He was a Marine, and we met there. We were pen pals. I went to see him maybe like 10 or 11 months later. And then I went back out there like 2 weeks later and we got engaged. So
wow.
Speaking again, but this would be a real true test. I see people in real estate. For people that don't know, I've started my career over 4 times. And so I went to North Carolina, not going to spend a ton of time there, but I got married and started my business over again because I had that skill set that when you get out of a bubble that basically preaches that, I was the anomaly at every other company I'd been at. So it's like, so I picked up the phone, started making money, you
knew how to do this, and no one was going to take that away from you. You already had done it once, so you could do it again.
Yeah. And, I just, again, super hungry for success, like personal development, coaching. I've always had coaches. I mean, from the first year in business, I had a coach. And so grew there. He got out of the military. That again, I raised his daughter. That would be another pivotal moment. We had full-time custody of her. My ex-husband's name is Robert. He hurt his back in the military and became dependent upon prescription drugs. He too was definitely super verbally abusive and even physically abusive at times. We moved to rural Texas, started my career over again. This would be number 3. I've always been in the top 10 to 5% of each company I've been at. I think I won't go there yet. And my drinking really took off with him. We were the party house in North Carolina. We were the party house. We lived on an island. And I think a lot of immaturity, like a lot of adolescence, was just living through that. But I had my success, and that's been my career has been my best relationship in a lot of ways, the best thing that's happened to me in a lot of ways. We moved to Texas and things were just scary. Things were unpredictable. Again, my best friend Sarah flew down, and I left with a note. I didn't say goodbye to Savannah. That's the little girl that I had raised for 5 years. that will probably
Wow,
be the regret that I have the rest of my life. You know, I didn't do that well. And yeah, so I moved to the city and I start my career over for a fourth time. And that was by far the hardest. It was, I mean, real estate in Houston, if anyone, you have an office in California, real estate in a big city where there's a lot of luxury, it's a different beast. And I had coaching there and had a lot of really great accomplishments, but my drinking was out of control, out of hand. And it's very normal in that big city to be bad and bougie. I mean, just because you think you're classy because you're at a nice establishment, like blacking out, you, like doesn't make it any better than being under a bridge. Really. And I'm dating some people that are probably not great. I've dated this cartel guy and who owned a real estate company, and this is like where I'd say an area of where you and I would start talking, somewhere around there.
Because I remember you were with him and he was Mexican, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd have like big, huge parties with mariachi bands. It was like very, but I was doing a lot of cocaine. At this time, my mom had moved in with me, and then I moved into this house. And I think for anyone that's struggled with addiction, like you realize, like, I don't know, you start to like, you just can't trust your thoughts. So I broke up with this guy. It was very scary. The people that were around us ended up getting murdered like 3 weeks later. Yeah. So like, and this is again, like if anyone were to scroll through my social media, you would just see a girl being like success, real estate, you know, like I didn't know how to share. And I was trying to get sober because I was like kind of psychotic, like I couldn't trust my own mind, and I had a gun at my house for protection. And so when I would, at the end of days of my drinking, when I would get drunk, the gun would basically talk to me like in my own mind and be like, you know, just essentially telling me to kill myself, which is so crazy because when I hear people that are like, there's a voice telling me to kill myself, like you'd be like, you're insane. But I was so like, what I finally realized was like my addiction, my alcoholism had beat me. Like it had, I could maybe date another guy. I could maybe sell another house, but I certainly couldn't drink any more alcohol.
Wow.
At all. So got sober, and that was in October of 2018. And I decided I didn't want to do real estate anymore. You know, real estate had been amazing, but you have to be hungry if you want to be really successful in real estate. I mean, and I coach business owners today that have that same hunger and drive. And you see this all the time is it's like, there's no judgment against whatever level of success you want to have. But if you want to do it at a high level, you better still enjoy what you're doing because, you know, like
That's sustainable if you don't.
no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I decided I was gonna look at other options. I met a wonderful guy named Warren, who is in oil and gas. He was a captain of huge like container ships and worked in the oil industry, and super great guy, very handsome, also in recovery. And I started to do some pretty deep healing. And then I found breath work, and breath work single-handedly, I had been in therapy, I had been with coaches, was the first time ever when I first did my first session that I felt really safe in my body. Like from a little girl dealing with abuse to a girl chasing success and could never stand still to a girl that liked to party and drink too much. I mean, there were always programs running. And when I found breath work, I was like fully embodied and like knew I was going to be okay. So it was amazing. Yeah, it was just incredible. And then I started to look at other options and in terms of career. And I ended up during the pandemic, I knew I was going to move to Montana this past year. But like COVID hit and Warren was like, come up to Montana. This is where Warren lives with, he has a son here. And I was ready to get out of the city. Like I was already planning on moving out of the city. I was tired of Houston and tired of the heat. And I ended up coming up in March. And then like a month later, I was like, okay, let's go get my stuff. Like I don't need to pay for my apartment. And even before that, I was like, okay, I'm going to coach business owners. I'm going to do coaching very different or people in success or in sales because and I wanted to ask you, I know you wanted me to share my story, but I think a lot of coaching that I had early on was super masculine. It was just like, what are your numbers? What are your goals? Where are you at? Which is really important. Would you say that that's what your experience was early on with coaching?
Yeah, my first few coaching sessions and coaches were definitely that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I moved into like life, spirituality,
Yeah.
and like consciousness, and just way more on the other end. And it's so cool to have both, you know? It's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
making like I'm making my own unique thing. But like I'm grateful for all the sales and skills and accountability, and some of those things definitely have like its place for sure in business, of course. But I feel like I've definitely shifted way more into like intuition and really listening to my higher self and making decisions, and so I'm more connected to, I would say, more of that spirituality, even through business.
Yeah.
Where are you? Like, what is your platform? Is it that?
My coaching is. So I looked at, I mean, definitely there's just some fundamentals to be successful, especially in the beginning. Like it just is what it is. But you know what I mean? It's like, but and as I've worked with more established business owners, it's like having this fulfillment. You know, it's like writing, I have a lot, well, not a lot, but at least two of my clients, they have to write their highest self journal to me every morning. It can be small, but it's like, who, not like, okay, I'm going to make $1 million this year, $2 million this year. It's like, no, who is that person? What do they feel like? How do they interact? How are you showing up in a relationship? How are you trusting your intuition? What are you manifesting? What doesn't feel good? What are you keeping secret? Like really this whole container. And I think too, because I've been through so much that the people, so I started this in June, the people that just came to me, they were like, hey, because I started sharing my journey about 2 years ago. And I've been loving that. So the business coaching is amazing. And it's fun to show people business can be totally intuitive along with some masculine and feminine, but it can be authentic. Like your business can be authentic to you. And you don't have to be in this fearful place. It's like you've got to own who you are. That's why, you were put here. And then we can build whatever we need to around that. So that's what I do with that. And then the breath work is also something I do. It's that's been a little bit more intuitive. So I and that's been hard. It's like the business coaching is something that I can like put tangible things around in some ways. I can work process with people. Whereas when you're working with energy, when you're working with trauma, when you're working with somatic therapy type vibe, it's like literally it feels kind of esoteric at times. But to explain the process, because I'm now realizing when people breathwork's a very trendy thing going on right now. There's different types of breath. So my teacher's name is David Elliott. And then another teacher of mine who studies underneath him, her name is Erin Telford. It's a 2-part breath through our belly, up through our chest, out through our mouth. It's very active to turn our mind off. We flood the body with oxygen. And
So amazing. Like I've done breath work
yeah,
maybe 3 times, and it's like it's unbelievable. Like the experience of it, I'm blown away. But
yeah,
it's definitely a very, like how you said, intuitive, like like connection to your like core of your higher self. It's like it is extremely healing.
Yeah. So I call that your home frequency. So
Mm.
it's like and I heard that from another teacher, but it's like, we don't know who we are. Like if we went and pulled 80 people and said, tell me what you're feeling right now, I'd say 70% would say anxious. Like,
Yes. And in fact, like that's what's going on the internet right now. Like
but
we
not even
want
like
anxiety, we want to know who won. It's like
that. Let's say like past that or even before that, right? It's like we're in this time with COVID where it's like I think the universe or life is asking people to get more clear about who they are, where they stand, what matters to them. And so things are coming up. And so, like, when we're anxious or when we're judging or when we're jealous or when we're depressed, these are all just byproducts of things that we have literally stuffed down in our body.
Mhm.
And like, that's where it has to come up somewhere. And
Yeah.
so when you do breath work, we move all that energy, we process that. And I do private sessions and then I do a small group. And that's where I'm at. So that's the ins and outs. And I'm not making, let's say, the money that I was before. That's also been something where it's like, oh, I'll grow to that again. But I'm like living embodiment of like, I will not have anything that does not feel good to me. That doesn't mean I don't work hard. But like if it goes against where I'm at and who I am, then I won't be able to show up and be in high exchange with the universe, with others, with myself. So, I'm growing and scaling in a way that feels authentic to me. And
And money is just one form of energy, right? Like it's just an exchange for your value in the marketplace. But I always tell my team this: there's so many other ways to grow,
oh yeah,
and that's a byproduct of what you're creating anyway. So right now, you're just in the process of it. But I love that like this is so relatable to the podcast because it's all created around finding success and fulfillment. Because if you just have success, if you just have the money, like that's such an empty path. That's such an empty life. And
well, that's where you go and find things that go even farther against who you are, right? Like
yeah,
I'm very high
like
success.
it's a form of avoidance as well. I found myself when I was really in the grind and like I still work hard all the time. Like I'm working on my business probably all day and even in the middle of the night, but it's a different form of creation and work, and it's exciting. When I've been in my moments in life where I've been like in the grind and just work, uh, create goals, high goals, achieve, create goals, achieve, create goals, achieve. It's so empty, is so meaningless.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to shift the focus of how am I really fulfilled? How am I really enjoying this ride? How am I happy? Like exactly what you've done and what you're doing in this process. And then, okay, awesome. Then how do I monetize this? And so I feel like if our society would shift
Oh,
happiness
I was just gonna
like
say.
firsthand, most important thing, man, if we can teach the next generation
Yeah.
that, like that is everything. So um your story is, and I didn't know a lot of these things that you shared with us today, and I'm super grateful,
Oh my
and
God.
I
We're
honor
gonna
you
invite
for.
my colleague. We just need to just hug and just
I know. There were a
survive.
few times in it I was like,
Yeah,
tearing.
no, I'm flattered to even be on here and just show people. I think more than anything, when I share my story, it's just like I don't buy into any part of my story. It just is what it was. I use it where I need to. It shows me my strength. It can show me my weakness. But today, like I show up with Sophie, and like that's the biggest deal. Like I don't wear masks or try not to. And I show others like, hey, you can be totally you and go kill it. Like it can be money. It can be, if I wanted to scale my business, Maria, to where I was, a few years ago, it would be no problem. But it's like, I'm not doing like you're saying. And so I just think if anything, and you do this too, is it's just like embodying who you are and then being like, what are we going to take from that and go out and have courage to like own where you're at, you know?
I love it. And courage to live the life you really want to.
Totally.
And so, man, you have like
I,
this is talk about deep conversations. This is
yeah.
my deepest, episode ever. And just really, really honoring your authenticness, your truth.
Yeah.
And I know that, you've done a lot of work to be able to heal a lot of those deep wounds for you to be able to even have these conversations, which is so
Yeah.
incredible. And like some of the things you went through are just unbelievable. And I just highly respect how you made the decision and the choice to take that drive you had and turn it into something so positive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And going from like the lowest of the lows to feeling the highest of the highs, and with the work you're currently doing to help others rise into that is like phenomenal.
Thanks, Boo.
I honor you, sis. Sophie, how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in
So
your coaching, your breath work? Like how
all
do they
things. Yep. So go find me on Instagram, Sophie Jones _sacred coach. So you can book it. You can book a discovery call for business there. You can book one-on-one breath work with me there. I also do my group event there, or you can see the registration there. And then SophieJonesSacredCoaching.com. So it's a little long, but it's just Sophie Jones Sacred Coaching. You can find me there, and again, do all the things we just talked about. And then obviously I'm on Facebook, Sophie Jones. I'm friends with Nuria, so you can find me under her friends.
Woo!
And just, I honor you too. It's been fun to watch your journey. It's been fun to see you be a light for other women and to watch you soften. It's like,
Thank you.
it's been beautiful. Yeah, I've been a part of your mastermind, and I see a lot of women look up to you, and I see a lot of women like really trust you because you come from integrity. And we need that. We need leaders like you. So I love you, and thank you for having me.
I love you too. This was a wonderful time, and seriously, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure that a lot of listeners will be completely blown away in a good way, and inspiring people to really know that something that happened in your life does not have to define you. And I think you're the perfect example of that.
Thanks, babe. Hey.
Thanks everyone for listening. A great podcast, great episode. Have an amazing day, everybody.